You're listening to Wargaming Recon with Jonathan J. Reinhardt. I want to say, first of all, that we are a very proud member of the TSR Podcast Network here at Wargaming Recon. And today we're going to be talking about some updates that we have to past Kickstarter projects discussed on the show. So before we go any further, I want to remind all of you, new and longtime listeners alike, that we have a lot of things that we're going to talk about on the episode, as we always do. We don't expect you to remember them all, but don't worry, we got you covered. You can go to our show notes at wargamingrecon.com/WR201. That's wargamingrecon.com/WR201. And at those show notes, you'll be able to find links to things that we discuss, things that I probably even forgot that we had mentioned on this episode. You'll get them there. You'll have links to all of our other content, such as our episode guide and past episodes. And you can also find out a bit more about us. And you can even get links to other things that we do, such as video content that we release on Facebook and YouTube and elsewhere. So you can check that out once again by going to our show notes at wargamingrecon.com/WR206. So for today, we have kind of a hodgepodge of content to share. And these are all Kickstarter projects that we have discussed on the show at one point or another. And we realized that despite having mentioned them on the show, we never really updated you with what was going on with them, what their progress was, where things are going with them. Did they actually deliver? Did they not deliver? How's that going? So we thought we would share some of these. And because they are, as I said, a medley, there's not enough for any one of them to create an entire episode around it. So rather than just doing a small segment, we thought we'd make this one episode here for you to enjoy. And then you'd be able to get a lot of different content together in this one episode. And it also makes it a little bit easier, I think, for when you want to find things to listen to. So you can just look and know that the title of this is Kickstarter Updates. And if you're interested in crowdfunding, crowdsourcing, you're interested in Kickstarter or Indiegogo or any of that kind of stuff, you might look up those terms on the interweb. You might go into Google and type that, and you'll be able to find us when we show up in those rankings there and in all of your results. Whereas if we had like 5 different episodes and there's only small segments in them dealing with this, we're less likely to appear. Or even if you go to our website, wargamingrecon.com, and again, you're doing the search thing, we got a search bar, you're more likely to get this content that you want because it's all together, instead of being like, I got to listen to this episode and listen to that episode. Next thing you know, you're like, I got to listen to 9 episodes to get little snippets of each thing, and nobody wants to do that, right? Just, that's not how we enjoy things. But I think you're going to enjoy this episode. The first Kickstarter that I want to talk about is Miniature Wargaming, the movie. So this is something that we introduced way back in 2015. We did that on episode 148. Feels like a lifetime ago as I'm sitting here talking to you in 2018, or when you listen to this, it could be whatever year. The Miniature Wargaming, the movie Kickstarter was unique for us to recommend because it was a film. It is intended to be the first documentary to properly cover the wargaming hobby, the hobby that you and I love and enjoy. It included, as some rewards, digital copies of the documentary with a planned delivery date of January 2016 and physical copies by December 2016. So not bad, considering that it was introduced, I think, in the middle of 2015. A second Kickstarter was launched in 2016 to raise a further 19,000 plus British pounds on top of the original 5,500 British pounds from the first Kickstarter. They realized that they needed more money to do the things that they wanted to do. They set the goal too low, which is a problem with some Kickstarters. They think, okay, we really want to make sure we get funded so we can get this thing going. what's the absolute minimum amount of money that we need? And they pick a sum, and then they realize, well, things cost more than we thought, or there are delays which add more cost, or they need to get something else made, or this happens, or something else, or turns out maybe they didn't do their homework and they didn't get the pricing right. So then they need more money. And I'm not saying these things happen with miniature wargaming, the movie for the Kickstarter, but they did realize that they grossly underestimated how much money they would need to make this film because they wanted to do some travel. They wanted to go to some events and tournaments and conventions. They needed to make sure that they had money for the audio, all sorts of sound, and for video footage. They were able to record a lot themselves by interviewing people within the industry, such as the Perry brothers. But then there were other things. They wanted archival footage. So it wasn't just a current thing, but that it really looked at wargaming throughout the ages, as it were, the hobby of wargaming. And as such, they needed access to material. And they have to pay licensing fees to be able to use all that kind of stuff. So this second Kickstarter was created to kind of get the extra money that they should have asked for the first time that would really allow them to create a finished product that would be incredible. They could have done it with the original 5,500 pounds that they raised, but it would have been a very minor affair and not properly done. So they felt that they owed it to everyone who backed in the first one, along with people who are going to back in the second Kickstarter, to do it right. The One of the smart things actually that they did with this was pushing back the delivery dates, or I should say estimated delivery dates. So in the second Kickstarter, they pushed both digital and physical copies of the film to November 2017. They also added extra physical rewards on top of the physical rewards on the first Kickstarter. So you had a combination of things like exclusive miniatures, exclusive wargaming products, and bundles and things of that sort, along with all the other rewards that they had. As of the time that I'm recording this, which is early 2018, the most recent update, which is from January 2018, has come out saying that things are nearing the end. They're getting everything lined up. They had a lot of delays, which were unexpected, and they've had some changing in people they contracted with for different work, such as sound work and visual and 3D kind of things and computer animation. They also had a hiccup where they wanted to get this translated into as many other languages as possible. So for the subtitles, it turned out the firm that they contracted with didn't do proper translations, and it was discovered by some backers who volunteered their time to be proofreaders and learn this. And so then things got correctly retranslated for the subtitles, and they had some other issues where they weren't able to get access and rights to use footage that they wanted. A big one that they really wanted was footage from Games Workshop. Games Workshop, of course, said no, and things of that sort. Hopefully, and this is me talking, hopefully the Kickstarter will deliver sometime in 2018, which will be, well, we talked about it in 2015, right? So it'll be 3 years behind. And this one is probably, as I glance at my list of Kickstarters that we're going to talk about, is probably the only one that I can think of that won't be delivering anywhere near its estimated delivery date. Now, to cut them some slack, I will say that that second Kickstarter did push things back to November 2017, in which case they're not terribly far behind as far as Kickstarters go. They're just a few months behind. And depending on when in 2018, I do believe it's a when, not an if, but depending on when in 2018 the documentary comes out and gets delivered to backers, it might only be 6 months late for the second Kickstarter, much longer for the first. And as a comparison, the documentary that Adrian and I are in, and A Word from a Gamer, or A Word from a Gamer, I think is what it's going with now, by Nerd Rage News in the Nerd Broadcasting Network, that had a much quicker turnaround. A lot of it was done up on their own. They then did a Kickstarter and needed just a smaller sum of money, much smaller than what Miniature Wargaming is doing. And then they've been able to move forward with that. And it is being debuted in a matter of weeks at TotalCon. It's being submitted to film festivals and all that. And it's not as large of a project as the miniature wargaming movie. And I need to stress that miniature wargaming the movie is a huge project, and the one that I'm in not as large, but it's going to be standard as far as I understand, standard documentary length film. But you look at those and you can compare and you can see how they are. And look at miniature wargaming, the movie. Part of it is its scope got bigger. Joe Piddington, the director, I think in his head, he really had an image about what he wanted to do with this documentary. And I think he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to do it, that he wouldn't get the funding, he wouldn't have the time, he wouldn't actually be able to do it. So I think he shrunk it down in his head, but still deep down in his heart, he had this idea that maybe he could actually make it as large as he originally hoped. And so then I think after contracting the project for the first Kickstarter and then launching it and being successful, I think he grew it back out to really where he wanted it to be, where he felt most comfortable creatively speaking. And as such, the project I think did kind of balloon out. And if you were to ask him, I bet he would say he never grew beyond his original scope. But I'm going to go on a limb and say that's because internally his scope stayed the same. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know. That's just me hypothesizing. And if I'm wrong, I definitely owe Joe an apology and I will gladly give it to him. But I think this is what has happened. The next Kickstarter that I want to talk about here is the Hexographer 2 Kickstarter. We shared this in 2016 on episode 167. Designer Joe Wetzel came on the show. And as he said in that episode, and I hope you will go back to it if you did not listen to it, but as he said, he wanted to create an updated version of the Hexographer software. Hexographer is one of his pieces of software from Inkwell Ideas. He has a bunch. He has Dungeonographer. He did a Kickstarter for Cityographer, which I backed and I recommended on the show as well. Hexographer 2, Hexographer, he has a Coat of Arms one. And these all kind of come out of his love of tabletop gaming and role-playing games predominantly. So he did a Dungeonographer one, so you could create your dungeons, right? And then Hexographer, he did old piece of software actually by today's standard, but it's a great piece of software to allow you to easily create campaign maps for war games, role-playing games, and other aspects of world building. You might just like to create a world. And that's something I really got into because Henry Hyde in Battle Games Magazine had talked about through his first 10 issues, I believe it was. He had sections in them, little column, talking about world building for his Wars of the Faltenian Succession. And then he compiled that together into a booklet that you could then order from his online storefront that actually put all those articles together. I enjoyed just reading them and rolling the dice and creating my world building. But I thought, wouldn't it be great to be able to do it digitally? So I'd still roll the dice and everything, but I used Hexographer to actually create the worlds. And I didn't do a whole lot with it until I decided, wait, I should. So then I used that original software for the Deadhampton Revolution, which I discussed in episode 90 of the show, and also did a one-day campaign based off and inspired by an article from, I believe it was War Games Illustrated way back in, oh geez, what was that, 2014, 2012, something like that? Or it may have been WSNS. I honestly can't remember, but it was one of those two. I do think slightly more that it might be War Games Illustrated, but I could be wrong. And I used the software to create the maps for those. And I figured, hey, Hexographer 2 is going to be even better. I love Hexographer. Hexographer 2 is supposed to make things a lot easier, use fewer resources, update the graphics and the icons. It would be new icons. And Joe came on the show to talk about all of that and the plans and the release dates and everything. And then he launched the Kickstarter. It had an estimated delivery of the new software for February 2017. I got mine a little bit after that, just a few months later, and he's still working on it. And that, as far as he's concerned, it's a finished project. It's been finished for a while, but he's just been doing updates. He's someone, because he's a programmer, right? He wants it to be as good as it can be. He wants it to be better than it can be. So he's always kind of fleshing it out and tweaking little minor bugs and adding extra functionality. So this is another Kickstarter that I think kind of grew some, not a lot, but some beyond its original scope, because part of being a backer for a Kickstarter, you get extra say in the project usually. get extra updates and things like that. And Joe really wanted backers to have a say. So one of the backer levels was that you got like extra early access to it. It was like an alpha or beta access to this software. And that allowed you to return bug reports to him and also allowed you a chance to give feedback. Actually, everyone had feedback about prioritizing different aspects of the software, stressing what you felt was more important, things that could be better, features that you really wanted. Joe really good with all of that. And he ended up with a project a little bit different in scope than originally intended, but amazingly well done. Hexlogger 2 is a piece of software I highly recommend for any wargamer, whether you do fantasy, whether you do historicals, you do pulp, you do sci-fi, you do role-playing games, you do minis, whatever. I highly recommend it. You could also use it to do online or play by mail or play by email games. So let's say you really like playing 1775, for example. You could try to replicate the board on there and then people would do turns. So you could just do your own narrative campaign and then you play with a bunch of friends and you can reveal portions of the map to the appropriate people, kind of like lifting off a drop cloth from your table and be like, this is what you see. And then you can do it that way so you can play at a distance. You might not have gamers near you who want to play what you want to play, or the rules, or the period, or the scale, or any of that kind of stuff. No worries. Get Hexographer 2. You can create your map and then digitally share a campaign map and then be able to fight the battles on your tabletop. Even though you're at a distance, you can use things like YouTube Live, or you can use Twitch, or even Skype, really, to do any of that kind of stuff. Hexographer 2 is very versatile, very accessible, and the Kickstarter project delivered basically on time as far as Kickstarter projects go. So that was pretty cool. Another one that I want to share is probably the most successful Kickstarter I can think of, insofar as ones that I would have backed. It is a Cigar Box Battle double-sided gaming mats. So Cigar Box Battle is an incredible company. They make, in my opinion, a unique product. The tabletop gaming mats are like unlike anything else. You've seen like the fat mats with the neoprene and that mouse pad kind of material, very resistant to fluids getting on them, which could be good with small children or for a game store. But I don't really like the look or feel of them. They are too 2D for me. You also have seen people make a lot of homemade gaming mats out of teddy bear fur. You can kind of get a nice look, but there's a lot of work involved. And actually, for me, the teddy bear fur is a little too tall, right? So Cigar Box Battle has 2 lines of mats, and they've been doing really well. And they thought they could do better, so they wanted to do a Kickstarter. One line of mats that I love are their plush mats. These are short teddy bear fur mats. It's almost like they took teddy bear fur, went to a store, got a ton of it, right? And then took like electric razor and went and gave it a shave because it's tall enough for it to have texture, for it to be warm enough if you're chilly on the way to your gaming event. You can wrap it around yourself, pretend you're a superhero or whatever. Short enough that it takes the artwork really well. It doesn't inhibit the use of miniatures because sometimes with that normal teddy bear fur, it's too tall, right? And you're trying to move your figures around and they get stuck or it gets tangled. You don't have any of that in this. They also have another line, which is their felt. It's really high premium quality felt. Looks amazing. I got to say the plush stuff is much better, in my opinion, aesthetically. But not everything comes in plush. For this Kickstarter, they said, okay, we want to do something that we've never done before that was unique even to them, and that was double-sided mat. So that for basically the price of one mat, you could get 2 designs on it. And they had a whole list of designs. It wasn't their whole catalog because some things wouldn't work. Water didn't work so well. I think desert didn't work so well. They have snow stuff, also didn't work as well. But almost all the other stuff worked. So you could pick 2 designs, and that way your one mat with just a flip would become a different map. So that way you could get double your value there and double your use for a limited price. It also would help you with space. A lot of us don't have much room for storage where we live or where we game. So with one piece of gaming product, you got a lot of use out of it. Same great quality as everything else. We discussed Cigar Box Battle in 2017. Did both in episode 176, where reviewed their mats, not the double-sided mats, but just the normal mats, both the plush and the felt. Then also in episode 183, co-owner Chris Ward came on and he alluded to that Kickstarter. And actually, I got an advanced preview copy of the mat and did some video with it and loved the double-sided. Then ended up buying it, backing it on Kickstarter. Adrian did as well. A lot of people did actually, and just fell in love with the mat. In addition to being probably the best received Kickstarter that I've ever covered and backed, as far as I know, it's the only Kickstarter that I've ever backed where the product was delivered before. That's right, you heard me, before the estimated delivery date. So they had asked for $1,500 American dollars in funding. They got over 71,000, and they had not promised, but they had expected, I should say, to deliver the mats by the end of 2017. And I got mine like 2 or 3 weeks early, if not earlier. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And I was all excited. I know that they have another Kickstarter planned for 2018. No details as of yet. I love the mat. I love all the mats. I have several of them. I have a Cigar Box Battle problem here. I have several of their normal mats. I got, was it 1 or 2 of the double-sided mats? And with the double-sided mats, I should add, they released some exclusive designs. So those are now part of the normal catalog, but they became possible because of the Kickstarter. But they had said when they did the Kickstarter that that was a one-time only deal for the double-sided mats, that they will not be doing them again. If I am correct, and I hope I am, but if I am correct, I believe they were able to have an arrangement for a limited time only to do double-sided mats at a decent price, and that's why they were able to do it with the Kickstarter. So it's pretty neat. If you backed it, you know what I'm talking about, and if you didn't, be on the lookout on the secondary market or at a convention, because maybe someone might be willing to part with one if the price is right. We have another Kickstarter to talk about. Everlasting, the best wet palette. It was launched in late 2017 by Redgrass Games from France. I believe they are in Paris. They sought to deliver a much improved wet palette for all the painters out there. So whether you paint miniatures, or, I mean, it's predominantly for miniatures, but whether you do miniatures or you do standard art, you might be actually painting a painting per se, you could use a wet palette. And they felt that the existing wet palettes just didn't do the job, that it could be better. And they wanted to create this Kickstarter to make it better. They had decided that to do this, they would offer 2 options. There's basically a smaller and a larger version. You get paper that goes in it, and if you're not familiar with a wet palette is basically an object that allows you to paint and allows you to store the paint so that it doesn't dry out. So it usually has a container. A lot of people will do homemade ones using like Tupperware or a Rubbermaid container, a plastic container of an appropriate size that has a lid. You put sponges in it. You get them wet, damp, but not soaking. And you put some sort of paper on top, parchment paper, tracing paper, not parchment, but like, well, no, you could do parchment paper, I guess. Parchment paper might be ideal. And you put it on, it adheres to the sponge just enough to keep it semi-stuck there, not permanently, but for the moment. And then you put your paints on it, and because there's water there, it keeps them fresh so they don't dry out. It also makes it easier for any adjustments you want to make to the paint. So you might want to mix them per se for a custom color. With so many colors out there, a lot of people don't mix anymore. I like to mix. Raise your hand if you like to mix. Me. Most people do not, right? Most people just say, I'm going to go buy this particular paint from Citadel or from Vallejo because there's a gazillion different shades and colors and hues and You name it. There's like 14 different types of purple if you want purple, 84 different types of gray, right? Depending on what your needs are. So you just tend to buy the one that looks closest for what your needs are. But if you want to mix, you put it in the wet palette and you can mix and it stays. And then you just close it up when you're done with your painting session and put it on the side. And then you can come back later to it. I mean, not like months and months and months later, but you can come back some days later or just later in the day or maybe even up to a week or so. It's worth a test to see how long it would last. And then you open it up and you can get back to painting. As someone with a small child who just turned 3, I don't get a whole lot of time to paint. I like to paint, just I don't have a whole lot of time. The time I do get, short bursts. A lot of us will want to paint, say, a unit of something or do a lot of detail in a showpiece model. And we might want to spend 2, 3, 4 hours painting. I don't have that liberty. I get 20 minutes, maybe half an hour that I could paint. And in that time, I got to do it and I got to get my paints to last. So I might have that amount of time, say once a day, maybe twice a day, or just a few days a week. I could really throw away a lot of money by just putting some paint on a thing and then off it goes. And go through a lot of paint and just waste it. Not good for the environment because it's trash. It ends up with a thing. Not good for my wallet. Not good for anything. So that's where a wet palette comes in. The ones from here for this Kickstarter really intrigued me because they looked aesthetically pleasing, definitely modern, nicer than anything else, but they also claim to have a better sponge because I'm sure any of us who would have a damp sponge around would be concerned about bacteria and germs and that. It's supposed to be extra antimicrobial for this Kickstarter, better paper, and more durable design. So I was like, "Ugh, I think I really want to back this." And thankfully, with the help from the kind people over at Enfilade, they helped us to back this Kickstarter. So we will be reviewing it along with other wet palette options later in 2018. I've been very, very impressed with those who are organizing and are behind this Kickstarter because their communication has been flawless, just simply incredible throughout the entire process. They really have been understanding and helpful and welcoming to everyone along the way with clear, concise information. And of course, because they're in France, I speak French, but the English is impeccable. The grammar's fantastic. And the communications are in both English and French, which I really appreciate. Although I don't understand French, I have, limited exposure to French from my time in school. Not enough for me to remember any of it, but being able to see that, I know that it's of value to people. They have an estimated delivery date of March 2018. According to their communications, they are on track. I think they could potentially deliver by March 2018. I'm not expecting them to. I'm thinking they're going to be a couple months behind, but they could do it. When they launched Kickstarter, they had a goal of 37,500 euros. A lot of money, don't get me wrong. They raised 270,426 euros. So by actual totals, it's more than the Skybox Battle. But Skybox Battle was only asking for 1,500, and what they ended up getting was many, many times over that. And this Everlasting Wet Palette, obviously 270,000 euros and change, a lot more. But they were already asking for almost 40,000 euros, or almost 50,000 euros. So not that many times over that they were funded. So it's pretty neat. And as things come forward with the wet palette, we will be reviewing it, as I said, and doing that either as its own episode or as a part of an episode, reviewing it, comparing it to that. There's some other like standard art wet palettes that people like. So we will be picking up some of those and comparing those with the Everlasting one. And then I also have, I believe it's a Privateer Press or P3 wet palette that I've been using. So compare it with that. And maybe if I'm feeling adventurous, I might try making my own homebrew one, which is something that our social media coordinator, Jamie, likes and recommends. But I might try doing that maybe. Don't hold me to it, please. But I might try doing it and then putting that in the mix to kind of compare homemade versus store-bought, and then among the store-bought, compare them between the Everlasting, the P3, and I can't remember the name brand. I don't have it in front of me, but the standard art kind of one. And just seeing what we think is the best. So in addition to those Kickstarters, the Hexographer 2, the Miniature Wargaming the movie, the Battle, Double-Sided Mats, and Everlasting the Wet Palette, there are some Kickstarters coming up in 2018 that excite us. I wanted to share them with all of you. So as I said, I've already mentioned that Cigar Box Battle have another one coming. It's to be announced. No details about it. Don't know timing. Don't know what they're looking for money. Don't know what they're going to do. But I can tell you, if they're making another gaming mat, I'm on board because I love their stuff. And I'm sure that it will be as good as the double-sided mat for the Kickstarter that they've done. So that will be really good. Peter Bryant, who is a friend of the show and also head honcho and co-host of the Mythwits podcast, is going to be coming out with a revised Cube of Death game. Something that I played way back at TotalCon, and he sent an early prototype, really, of this new version. He's since revamped it more, but he's going to be launching that on Kickstarter soon. Previously mentioned on the show that, not this episode, but a prior one, that he had another Kickstarter that people should back, his Rogue Chess Kickstarter. He came on the show to talk about that. We're hoping to get him to come on an upcoming episode to discuss the Cube of Death game. And from the little bit that I know of the new way it's being done, and also my experience with the old one, I think you'll like it. It blends trivia knowledge, geek trivia knowledge, really, gaming trivia knowledge, geek trivia knowledge, sci-fi knowledge, tech knowledge, that kind of stuff, with a role-playing game. It used to just be a trivia thing where you'd go around and you have trivia. And he was trying to blend it with like rolling dice to do damage and stuff. And he's since kind of morphed it more into, there's a role-playing game you're playing, but during the course of the role-playing game, you might have to do, instead of like a skill check, you might have to pull a card and answer questions, or have the other player or other side answer questions. So the DM might ask questions and so forth. I'm hoping to play this at TotalCon, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he's doing with it. I really loved his Rogue Chess Kickstarter. We recommended it. I think he's a very talented game designer, and I think Cube of Death could be a big breakout for him. So I'm hoping to share that with all of you. And speaking of breakouts and big Kickstarters, Dwarven Forge has two, not one, but two Kickstarters planned for 2018. A smaller one will be coming out earlier in the year, focusing on miniatures. The plan is for them to be miniatures that they haven't released. In case you don't know, Dwarven Forge is a company that's created a whole line of modular building stuff for your tabletop games. They started with things for role-playing games, so you could create dungeons and all that kind of stuff. They expanded into castle building and into city building and more dungeon stuff. They've done, I think, five Kickstarters, I think, so far. All except the first one, I think, have at least gotten $1 million. The last couple have done 2 or 3 million for funding. They are beautiful pieces of product. Talked about their terrain stuff on our video channels, where did some videos of some pieces that they sent to us to review. And the miniatures Kickstarter, as I said, will be the smaller one. It's going to be organized by Stefan Pokorny, who's the creative guy and the head honcho over there at Dwarven Forge. He's a really nice guy, very talented. He's the subject of this amazing documentary called The Dwarvenaut, which you can find on Netflix. I recommend that you go watch that. And then a second larger Kickstarter will be coming out. It's going to be similar to what they did in 2017 with their Dungeon of Doom Kickstarter. So more pieces for that, more geared towards role-playing games, more geared towards actual encounters, so that each kind of level or backer level for the Kickstarter will feature another section of encounter or encounters for the dungeon or the thing, so that like Dungeon and Doom, you can back and get like everything, which is a whole dungeon, or you can just back for portions of it. That's going to be organized by Nate Taylor, who works for Dwarven Forge. He recently joined them full time. He's a very talented person, especially with video. So he kind of organized their live stream for the Dungeon of Doom Kickstarter last time. And we're working with Dwarven Forge to get Stefan and Nate to come on the show in 2018 so that they can talk about both of those Kickstarters, probably in a one go. We'll do one episode talking about all of that and just learning what's going on and maybe get our hands on some things to review, but we'll be sharing this when that comes out. We've talked about a lot of Kickstarters this episode, and I know not all of you are familiar or comfortable with crowdfunding, whether it is being a backer or using it as a creative person to launch something, whether you're trying to design a game you want to get out or a module, or whether you're like us here at Wargaming Recon, we use crowdfunding to keep the show going. But you don't have to worry about it because we've done your homework. Back in 2014, we released episode 118, and in that episode, we shared 5 guidelines for backing a Kickstarter. And I believe the actual title I used for my 5 guidelines, they make me laugh. The 5 guidelines I called back then, Jonathan's Not a Lawyer, 5 guidelines for backing a Kickstarter. So I would recommend you listen to episode 118. But just so you don't have to go here and there and everywhere, I'm just going to reshare right now my 5 guidelines for backing a Kickstarter. And the reason I'm doing this is because you might have heard something that piqued your interest in one of the Kickstarters we mentioned. Maybe one of the ones that were already successful. Maybe you had seen us talk about it before and you didn't feel comfortable backing it, so you didn't, right? Maybe you're hoping these people might do another Kickstarter, like in the case of Cigar Box Battle or Peter Bryant or Dwarven Forge. And maybe you're thinking, I might want to back one of those Kickstarters. But you're worried because you've never backed something like that before. You don't know how it works. You don't know the ins and outs. And you can spend a lot of time learning a lot of things about Kickstarter and the dangers of it and the good. There's a lot of scare stuff out there, right? If you look online for news articles, you hear all the bad stuff. You don't hear the good. So these guidelines should help you, and I hope they will reassure you to have a more realistic expectation of what you will be getting into and what you may be getting from Kickstarter. And speaking of expectation, the first guideline for backing a Kickstarter is to have a clear idea of your expectation. You need to determine if the Kickstarter project and your expectation match. If your expectation does not match what the project creator is doing, maybe you should not back the Kickstarter. The second one is to communicate with the project creator before backing. That is the best way to ask questions because you won't have any skin in the game at that point. If you have questions or concerns, reach out to the person who's doing the Kickstarter and say, can you tell me this? I've done this numerous times. I'll contact and say, well, I think what you're doing is intriguing. I'm interested in it and I'd like to back, but I have some concerns first. So there was one Kickstarter I had backed and it was for music. It was kind of medieval sounding music, a soundtrack for playing your games. And the person who did it so that like people could have it for a more immersive experience of doing role-playing games. And I thought, hey, I could use this for tabletop war games. It was recommended by Henry Hyde, and I thought, well, this is kind of neat, but I had technical questions about the music. I wanted to know what format the files were going to be, how I would get them, where they would be housed, all that kind of stuff, what kind of usage I was allowed to do with it. Because whenever you get into tech stuff like that with video or audio, you always have to be aware that just because you're buying it, you might not have the right to use it anywhere. I was like, well, what if I wanted to use this music for a game I would run at a con? Or what if I wanted to live stream the game? Or what if I wanted to record myself playing the game? Or what if I wanted to allow someone else to use the music, a friend, so that they could try it out? I wanted to know, how does any of that work? And so I communicated with a creator of the Kickstarter project before I backed and got my answers. And then I was happy with what they said. And I said, okay, that sounds good. The third guideline for backing a Kickstarter is to only pledge when you know the project creator, their work, or a respectable person you trust vouches for the creator and the project. So let's say your buddy who you've known for like 20 years is doing a Kickstarter, and you know that this is something that they will actually be able to accomplish. You've seen them do some of the things before. You know that they have the skills, they have the know how, they have the ability. You know that it will happen. That's a project you would probably be safe backing. Let's pretend this Joe Schmo in some other country. You've never heard of them. You don't know anything about them. You don't know anything about what they want to do, but it looks cool. It looks fancy. It looks shiny. And you're like, I want to have it. Should you back that? I would say probably not, unless you're familiar with other things they've done. So maybe this is a completely new venture for them. Maybe they're an artist, right? And they've done a lot of painting, but they're venturing out into sculpting or they're venturing out into filmmaking. And they've never done filmmaking before. They've never sculpted anything before. And you wanna back them, but you're like, "I don't know." Well, you know their work. You know of them, you know of this stuff, so you might be safe. But what if someone that you trusted said, "Hey, I'm vouching for this person. I'm saying that this is a good thing to do." And that person whom you trust could be a podcaster such as myself. It could be another buddy. It could be a family member. It could be a coworker. But it's someone who you trust for whatever reason. It could be your spouse, your significant other, right? In that case, you have to weigh your options and think, okay, well, maybe I don't know the project creator very well, but I have an idea of their work. And Larry at work, who has a really good head on his shoulders, it's never steered me wrong. He's been a great help with all these projects I've done at work. They say that this is going to be a good thing to do. Well, maybe then you should do it. The fourth guideline is to closely examine the Kickstarter project. Does it seem too good to be true? Is it unreasonable? Is it impossible? Read the fine print. Read the whole campaign. Some of these campaigns have a lot of text in them. It's like a small novel in there, right? Read it all. Read it twice. Take a break. And the next day, go back and look at it again because maybe you missed something. And look to see, okay, well, are they trying to film an Oscar winning sci fi or fantasy trilogy on a budget of $50? Will they be able to do that? Are they saying that they're going to be able to deliver modular magnetic trees for your tabletop gaming in 1 month? Are they someone who clearly has no idea of what they're doing because they don't put anything in the description for the campaign? It just says, back us, please. Or does it appear as if they've thought everything out? Does it appear that there's a reasonable time frame for things to get done? Does it appear that the amount of money they're asking for seems appropriate to accomplish what they want to accomplish? Now, nothing is guaranteed, right? There's no fail safe here. We've all heard about far too many Kickstarter projects where people have given money and the project's been funded and then nothing's ever come of it. Things that look reputable, things that been vouched for by the right people, things that have been done by someone you know, and just whatever reason, it's never seen the light of day. So that's why the fifth guideline I have is to pledge no more money than you can afford to lose if things go sour. So think of it like gambling, because in a way, it kind of is. You are pledging and backing the creator with money to allow them to pursue the thing in the Kickstarter project. And that thing might be they want to create double-sided gaming mats. You're giving them money to pursue it. And if they are successful, then they will attempt to give you whatever the reward is. You're not giving them money for the thing. So many people, myself included, have thought of Kickstarter like a store. And then It's a whole another topic and a whole another episode about is it becoming more of a store because there's a lot of exclusives on there now. That there was that Batman game, board game on there, only done that on there, and more board games and gaming stuff is being done that way. Where the only way you can get it is by backing on there, being done by these large companies, right, like Mantic or whomever, and you know it's going to get done. So really, you're just pre-funding your purchase, as it were. Or if you're a computer or video gamer, think of it like Steam Early Access, where the thing's going to get done. You're just paying for it upfront because they need an infusion of cash to get it done. Because maybe they can't go to the bank and get a loan, or they don't want to get angel investors or whatever. But you're not giving the creator $50 for this game. You're giving them $50 so that they can try to do the game. And as long as they are doing things in good faith, they may never actually get it done, which is frustrating for everyone and can cause a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of animosity. But as long as they're trying their best and they're continuing to do it and they're offering updates and things, that's what the agreement is. And that's why I say it's kind of like a gamble because you're giving them money in the hope that they can do what they say they can do. But if they can't, you don't want to give money that will cause you to lose your home, or lose your car, or have you be unable to eat, and be unable to afford groceries or whatever, or unable to pay your bills. It's not smart. And it seems like that's common sense, but sometimes common sense is not common enough. So at this point, I just have a few announcements for everyone that I want to share. TotalCon is coming up February 22 to the 25th, 2018 at the Best Western in Marlborough, Massachusetts. I will be there. I'll be recording a crossover episode with Peter Bryant and Mike Kafis of the Mythwits. Adrian was supposed to be there, but if you listen to episode 200, you know he's punking out. He won't be there because either he has to go for training for work, he has to go to Wisconsin, I think it is, or if he's not forced into that, it turns out he will be on vacation doing some wild pig hunting. And both of these were on dates he wasn't expecting. He's usually away on his vacation, like later, like the week or two after TotalCon. And if work tells him to go, he has to go. So he won't be at the convention. He will be greatly missed though. And as such, we're going to be adjusting some things that we're doing. For example, he had put into GM the game New Bedford. It's a fun board game about whaling. I know whaling and fun usually don't go hand in hand, but really it's an educational game about overfishing and the dangers of that. But also it's a historical game because it brings you back to the time of Age of Sail where whaling ships would go out and it was a thing. So that's not happening. So we got to cancel that. And I had hoped that Alex was going to be going, but it looks like he might not be able to make it as well. So I don't mean to make it, oh, poor me, but I'll be there. I don't have a finalized schedule yet. I will release that on social media. Make sure to check out our Facebook page. It'll be there, or on our Facebook group, the Wargaming Recon fan club group. Be able to check it out there. I do know that I have signed up for some games, and I can't remember what they are, but I believe there's an Access and Allies War at Sea one, like Sink the Bismarck. I think I'm doing. I'm going to the premiere of the documentary that Adrian and I are in, hoping to do Cube of Death and a few other things. Hoping to have a lot of free time, actually, maybe for some pickup games and to walk around the con and just see what's going on and meet people and do some shopping and stuff and check all of that out. And I should say that the crossover episode is not listed in the event listings for the convention, but you can go to it if you want to. So if you're interested in attending the crossover episode, it will be open to the public. We're going to be recording in the hotel room of the Mythwits, and I'll be sharing that information on social media as we get closer to the convention. Even at the convention, I'll share it on social media so that way people can find it with the time and everything. But it'll be Saturday night, I believe, during the dinner hour. So that's like 5 to 7, I think, something like that. But again, it'll be on social media. I want to thank the Wargaming Recon Army members. So I want to thank Patrick and all of the rest of you who support the show on Wargaming Recon and do that through Patreon, being a Patreon backer. So I am very appreciative of that. Speaking of Wargaming Recon Army, which is our Patreon campaign, we have big changes. They're here, they're active. We've gone through the first month of it. I'm really happy with it, and I hope backers are too. But you can also back by going to wargamingrecon.com/Patreon or just visit the show notes for this episode. wargamingrecon.com/WR201, and that'll have links to the Patreon campaign so you can become a Wargaming Recon Army member, and along with links to everything else that we have discussed in this episode. So you'll see that there. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Wargaming Recon. Don't forget, we have a new episode coming out soon. Episode 202 will be releasing on February 26, 2018. You can find out more by going to our episode guide. Again, the link is in the show notes at wargamingrecon.com/WR201. And that'll link you to the episode guide and all of that. So I think you know the drill. But if you're new, you don't. And that's okay. Because you will know it when you come back next time for another episode of Wargaming Recon. So no matter how busy you are, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how many Kickstarters you want to back or learn about backing, you know that you have to, you gotta, you need to keep on gaming.